Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Maria Ma, the Marketing Campaign Coordinator for Engineering.com, and I'm happy to welcome our speakers for today. We have Stephen Mulva, Director at Construction Industry Institute at the University of Texas at Austin. Stephen's current research projects are focused on improving the business outcomes of capital projects in most sectors of the modern economy. Also with us is Ben Breen, Managing Director for Asia Pacific and Global Head of Construction at Project Management Institute. Ben oversees regional activity to ensure PMI can stay close to the needs of stakeholders and provide solutions that create value for individuals and organizations. Now, before we get started, we'll first cover a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded, then available for on-demand replay on engineering.com. For attending this full live session, you'll receive your PDH certificate within 48 hours. And if you have any questions, please submit directly in your webinar interface, and we'll try to address all questions during Q&A. Now, without further ado, I'll pass it over to our first speaker. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Maria, and good day to everybody who's joined us. Ben and I are really pleased to be presenting some very interesting discoveries and findings with all of you today. So thanks for joining us. To get us started, actually Maria is going to launch a poll question, and we'd like to get the answers from the attendees. So Maria, I'll turn it over to you to ask the poll.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. All right, attendees. How much investment is needed in global infrastructure by 2035? Let us know which amount you believe is correct. 900 million, 2.5 billion, 500 billion, or 69 trillion. We'll give you a moment to respond. And here are the results. A whopping 62% selected 69 trillion, 31% selected 500 billion, 8% selected 2.5 billion, and I just want to mention nobody selected 900 million. Thank you so much for participating. Now, Stephen, back to you.
Okay, and thanks for everybody for participating with the poll. And as the majority got the answer right there in the middle, it actually is close to $70 trillion of global investment in infrastructure will be needed through 2035. And you know, that's only 13 years away. And the thing is that, and a lot of these findings come courtesy of our friends at McKinsey & Company. You know, construction is historically has been the biggest industry in the world. It's about 13% of gross domestic product around the world. And we really haven't been performing all that well. There's only been about a 1% annual growth rate for really about the past 2 decades. One of the big issues that's coming right to the fore is skilled labor shortages. And we see that all around the world, but especially in the US construction market, 41% of our craft professionals are expected to retire by 2031. And so that's only 9 years away. And so one of the things that we've been doing at the Construction Industry Institute and working in partnership with PMI is try to figure out how do we address these issues from a work process, from a technology, but especially from a people perspective. And so one of the key things that we're going to talk about today are a series of courses that CII was pleased to provide input to, but that PMI is launching. And I think that's really going to help upskill the people that are managing these large construction projects around the world. One of the other ways that we evidence that construction is not delivering is some of these statistics that you see on the screen. 98% of mega projects, that is projects over $1 billion, experience cost overruns. 95% fail to meet one or more of their business objectives. 70% of projects can't be completed within 10% of their budgeted cost or schedule. There's actually a statistic, the Dow Jones tracks for all the publicly traded EPC firms on the stock exchange. Last year was negative 0.84% profit margin. And so you get these comments like the CEO of SNC-Lavalin says, I think our current model within the industry is broken. We have to be doing better. We've got great people. This literally is one of the very most noble industries on the whole planet. I always say you can't have education or transportation or energy or healthcare if you first don't have a construction project. And so we're absolutely vital to humanity, but we could be doing a better job. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity. In addition to what's going on, there's also some big impacts from COVID-19, and Ben's going to address some of those.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Some fairly scary statistics there, so thanks for that. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here all the way from Melbourne, Australia. I've inverted my screen so you can see me the right way up. So what I'd like to run through now is just the impacts of COVID-19. And this is something that I know a lot about because my 2 children just yesterday have come down with this. So luckily they've got some pretty mild symptoms. So what I'll run through is, first of all, the projects that we're doing has fundamentally changed. You know, there's a lot less hospitality, retail, and entertainment projects, although some of those are starting to come back in again now with parts of the world opening up. But definitely the next 10 years, the focus is on infrastructure, transportation, and healthcare. So we saw the statistics about the $69 trillion. You know, obviously in places like America alone, there's $1 trillion or more that's been assigned to infrastructure rebuilds, and all sorts of governments around the world are doing that to stimulate the economy. So huge amounts of money being spent in that area. The second one is on worker safety. It's always been at the forefront, but even more so now. There will be a lot of off-site construction techniques to make sure that things are done in a safe and controlled manner. And the third one is on virtual meetings. So now, instead of just having people sitting in that site office and contributing to a project, we now have people dialing in from all around the world. And you could argue that this has made the communication better in some ways, or at least the inputs and the diverse thoughts coming in from all of these new tools and virtual ways of keeping in contact. The fourth one is the modularization and prefabrication. Similar to the second item, there is a lot of cost savings and the need to shorten schedules, because the last 2 years, so many of the projects have not even been proceeding. So to ensure that we're able to speed up and save money, and to Stephen's point about making sure that there's actually some profit at the end of the day, is going to be critical. If we look to number 5 here, it's on the digital supply network. So certainly the supply chain has been drastically affected, and we need to be a lot smarter in the way that we order and where we order from. So that's going to be crucial. Robots automating repetitive steps. We're already seeing, for example, the robots that lay a whole paver load of bricks in one go. So it's faster, it's safer. We see drones that are being used. We have a customer that has a control room that's just full of pretty much teenagers just sitting there controlling the zones and checking either facades of buildings or pipelines and making sure there's no issues. And the 7th one there on artificial intelligence. There are varying reports, but potentially up to 800 million jobs will be lost, or people will be displaced from their current roles in the next 10 years. So again, some pretty sobering statistics. And we already have clients that are using artificial intelligence for things like sensors that are sitting in the hard hats. And if they go near some heavy machinery, the heavy machinery cuts out. So we're seeing it being used in a lot of manners at the moment. On to the next slide, and I'll just cover the last few things in terms of loss of capacity across the industry. There's no doubt that COVID has been tough on the industry across all of the spectrums of business, whether it's human and financial capital, changing lines of business. There's actually many people that are doing that now. and the equipment obsolescence as well. So certain equipment that just can't be used anymore. There is a changing attitude towards a genuine partnership. So that's determining what your strengths are and what are the strengths of others, and doing some genuine partnerships all around the world. And the last one is the genuine understanding and the need for great training resources. So people and organizations have, they understand the importance of upskilling and being better and more efficient at what they do. So on that, I will just hand you back over to Stephen.
Great, thanks, Ben. So there are a lot of building blocks that go into these great training resources, and as we get further into the presentation, Ben is going to address exactly what the PMI courses entail. My purpose right now is to talk about some of the leading research that went into these course materials, and in particular the best practices that are embodied in those course materials. So for those of you who don't know, the Construction Industry Institute is almost 40 years old. We're a not-for-profit part of the University of Texas at Austin. And we literally have had close to 250 research teams over that 40-year period. So things that you know in the industry as zero accident techniques, constructability, advanced work packaging, these were either invented or formalized through CII research. So even the word zero, as it pertains to safety, is a CII practice and a CII word. All of our research is contained in this knowledge base, which is publicly searchable on CII's webpage, construction-institute.org. I'm going to highlight a few of these practices that are embedded in the PMI courses. The courses are called the Construction Professional and Built Environment Projects, and there are 7 of them. But to give you a flavor of the type of leading edge practice and thinking that goes into that, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about some of these practices. So the first is really a tool we use during front-end planning. It's a scope definition tool called the Project Definition Rating Index, and it creates basically a 70 to 1,000 point rating system. It's broken up into different types of projects. So at a high level, we have industrial projects, buildings, and infrastructure projects. Like golf, a high score would be bad. You would actually want a lower score. And typically, scores of 250 or 200 or less are considered to be very good scope definition. And scope definition, of course, is crucial if you're trying to be predictable on your cost and schedule, or be very efficient with your capital. Now, the way that PDRI works at a kind of a high level is there's essentially about 70 different elements. They're broken into 3 different sections. So section 1, which is shown here with basis of project decision. Section 2, generally basis of design. Section 3 is basis for execution. And the different sections are weighted differently, and the 70 elements in those 3 sections are also weighted differently. What happens here is a project team will look at a particular element, like element A4 on public involvement, and they'll say, have we really thought through the scope of the public's involvement in this project? And if we have, it's number 1, the definition level number 1, complete definition, you get a good score. We haven't thought of it at all, incomplete or poor definition, level 5. And some firms even use the PDRI as part of their stage gate process, meaning that they will not proceed with further funding on projects unless the project has a certain PDRI score. It simply doesn't have good enough scope definition to warrant more investment until or moving into detailed design or construction activities until some of the scope is figured out a little bit better. So PDRI and front-end planning is a key element of these courses. Now, the courses are addressing sort of the middle part of the market, and Ben will talk more about that, but there are still more advanced concepts. And so when we look at front-end planning, for example, CII has done research on the impact of regulations on the project lifecycle. And the little diagram at the bottom, you all realize that the project has a life cycle, but the regulations have a life cycle as well. So we were trying to future-proof the project from the impacts from regulations and take proactive actions to minimize the risks, maximize those opportunities. What that results in is a flow chart. Across the top, there's a development life cycle to regulations. In the power generation segment, like the silica standard in the United States, that regulation occurred over about a 21-year period. So, but other ones have occurred over a 4 or 5 year period. And the question is that a lot of the projects that are in engineering or construction are actually in flight when these regulations are coming along. So if you want to anticipate that, you could follow this flow chart. You could insert certain activities into your project, and those activities would be part of your project execution plan. They would also be part of the scope definition as you worked with the team to figure out, how are we going to work with the changing regulations, things that might be on the horizon. What happens if that comes into play? What we're trying to prevent are massive amounts of change orders. Relatedly, when you go through the PDRI process and you really start understanding the scope, a lot of the deficiencies show up as risks. So you say, well, we haven't really thought through how we're going to move all the equipment, across the oceans. The logistics plan really isn't there. And so now that represents a big risk to us. And so this is where years ago, CII created the Integrated Project Risk Assessment. Now the IPRA tool is also included in the PMI course modules. And so this is an important learning element in terms of understanding the impact and the quantity of risk that you would have on a project. And like PDRI, it has element descriptions. You would have an element such as taxes and tariffs, as are shown in the upper left corner. The team would understand, and rate what's the likelihood that this risk occurs on this project, and if it does, what would be the impact? The likelihood that a piece of major equipment falls off an ocean-going vessel as it crosses the Pacific Ocean is pretty unlikely. It's not likely that that's going to happen, but if it did, the impact would be huge because it potentially could add months to the schedule of the project and those kinds of things. And what this ultimately results in is a risk matrix so that the people on the project, the people managing the project, can understand the risks and provide mitigations for those. So the IPRA tool is included in these courses. An advancement on the IPRA tool would be something called flexible facility development. We understood that a lot of manufacturers, as they're going through engineering and construction, they still have uncertainty about the product that they're making in that plant. And this 75% of them said this often or always occurs on our construction projects. So the question was, how can we create a new method for having a flexible and a long lead facility that accommodates an evolving manufacturing process with possibly uncertain market demand? What emerged from that research, and this again is part of your risk assessment process, is, should you have a dedicated facility? Now, this is typically the answer. People say, we're going to make cars, we're going to make pharmaceuticals, we're going to have a facility that's completely dedicated to that particular product. But sometimes you don't know how much product you're going to make, or in the case of pharmaceuticals, you don't know if the governments will approve them for use. And so there are emerging ways to introduce flexibility into your projects. One is called scalable. You could make smaller factories. You could put them on different continents. That might help you with some supply chain issues. Or you could have a big building and you don't know exactly what you're going to put in it, so you provide excess utilities. Now, all of this would come at an increased cost, providing more utilities than you might need in a general purpose facility. But you might be willing to make that trade-off from a risk perspective because you're not entirely sure, if you were at a pharmaceutical company, which of the 5 drugs in development are actually going to come out and be approved by the governments first. And so for that reason, you might be willing to spend a little more money to accommodate that type of flexibility. Where this gets you to is a selection guide for the strategy, a way to evaluate those increased costs, and maybe even in this publication, there's about 50 different ideas that help the team brainstorm through different possibilities. So these are different ways that the research has shown, these best practices have shown that really help manage projects. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to to Ben to talk about some research that PMI did.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Some great information again. What I'd like to do now is to run you through some research done by PMI in our Pulse of the Profession survey, which goes out every year. And this one is focusing on the efficiency in the industry. So Maria, if you could launch that poll, please.
Awesome, thank you. For every billion spent in construction projects, how much is wasted? Let us know which amount you believe is correct. 100,000, 5 million, 127 million, or 500 million. We'll give you a moment to respond. And here are the results. 58% selected 127 million, 32% selected 5 million, 11% selected 500 million, and I do want to note that nobody selected 100,000. Thank you so much, everyone, and back to you, Ben.
Great, thanks, Maria. Yes, we definitely have a very educated audience here getting the correct answers. So yes, it is $127 million wasted for every $1 billion spent. It's again a staggering number if you think about that level of wastage and what we could potentially do with that amount of money that's wasted. So some of the other results show that over 70% of projects have some sort of scope creep, 72% have project delays, and 73% over budget. So you can see that the industry just is not performing well. So if we go on to the next slide, I just wanted to run through to show some further research that PMI did. We wanted to reach out to not just our members and our PMP holders, for example, but we wanted to go out to people outside of PMI, leaders in the construction industry. So we did a combination. We surveyed about 40,000 PMP holders, and then we did a lot of surveys one-on-one with the industry. And the first one, you can see we were asking about what is the subject matter relevance to a team. And you can see that things like the scope triangle, scope and change order management, communication, contract process, these were the key things that showed up for relevance to a team. We then wanted to ask, what is the subject matter most important in your specific role? We saw fairly similar things there with scope triangle, contract process, communication, scope and change order management, et cetera, et cetera. So very common themes coming across, whether it's teams or individuals. And then on the next slide, we continued to ask questions about, the most important skills for you in your role today. And we wanted them to select 3, and you can see here that things like leadership came out as number 1. Probably not surprising. Communication was very high on the list as well. That was 31%. And then cost control, decision making, and contract management. And then asking about the 3 skills most important to their role, you saw leadership, contract management, decision making, communication, etc. So again, kept coming up with some very similar themes here. And this allowed us to really understand, where we should be focusing, what's important to the industry. And that's exactly what we started to work on. If you continue on to I think the next slide, Stephen, is over to you. Yes, I'll pass it back to you.
That's right. Yeah, and in the prior survey, one of the things that we realized was that execution planning in particular was really important. And that shows up as scheduling and cost control and risk mitigation and planning. At CII, we learned as part of execution planning that probably the hottest practice going right now for many companies is this idea of advanced work packaging. And the easiest way to say this is it's a bit of the old work breakdown structure, but modernized and put on 3D design platforms and the like, so that you're actually breaking the scope of the project down into, you're decomposing it into specific work packages, both for construction and for engineering. We've been doing this for quite a while, the companies have, and we've studied this, and it's shown 25% improvement in field productivity. And of course, that was the main goal when the AWP work began. But there's also a 10% overall total installed cost decrease in cost, and better safety by about 30%. Introducing some artificial intelligence and machine learning to this, we believe that we can create even more gains. But if you're not familiar with advanced work packaging, let me just start by real quickly orienting you to this. So you may have a big facility. This happens to be an industrial facility, and this might not be the entire project, but this particular aspect of the project is called a construction work area, CWA. And if we zoom into certain part of this, let's just say this part of the facility, there is a scope here which we call a construction work package. Now, it has multiple disciplines, so you can see there's pressure vessels, there's some structure, there's piping, there's electrical, instrumentation, there's a number of things here. But what's highlighted in yellow is would constitute a particular construction work package. Now, in order for this work package to be completed by people in the field, it has to be engineered. And so this is by discipline, and there's also a conversion for systems. But the engineering work package, this would be showing all the piping engineering that would go into this particular construction work package. So what you see highlighted in yellow are the pipe spools and the different valves and the different types of piping that would go into that. Now, if you break this down to the lowest level, we have what's called an installation work package, and it used to also be called a field installation work package. But what's highlighted in yellow there is essentially enough work for 1 week for one crew. And so this decomposition, we've broken this down, and this helps us really achieve good productivity. In order to work on this work package, we need to know that we have the right drawings and the design information, that we have the materials, that we have the labor, we have the construction equipment. For this, for example, this particular one, you might need some kind of a crane to hoist these pipe spools into position so that you can fit them and weld them and those kinds of things. If you break this down, this really constitutes excellent execution planning. And this is one of the 7 courses is on execution planning. Primarily it includes advanced work packaging and lean last planner system, but also a little bit of planning for startup and completion commissioning and startup practices as well. Some of the leading companies in the world have really organized around advanced work packaging. This happens to be a diagram from Fluor. What I want to point to is right in the middle, you see it says path of construction, and they've really said what they want to do at their firm is construction-driven execution, that the construction, the field should drive and order how engineering is done and how materials management is done and these kinds of things. And ultimately, they want to optimize the path of construction. Ultimately, we also think we can update the path of construction based on material availability, drawing availability, those kinds of things. But this is one of the industry best practices right now. So as I said, AWP is embedded in these courses, and now I'll turn it back over to Ben to talk about the construction initiative at PMI and how that went about creating these 7 different courses.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, so I think we have set the scene with what's happening in the industry. We've talked about what CII has been working on over the years, and then specifically how that's moving into what we have created. So let me talk about that now. Just jump on to the next slide. Okay, so this is where we got together with some of the best and brightest minds in the industry. And we specifically wanted this to be industry-led. PMI facilitated it, but we got together with some great companies here, such as Jacobs and BHP. We've talked about CII. We also had the Lean Construction Institute join us, US Army, Saudi Aramco, so some of the largest organizations in the world. And we met over many months. This is through the COVID period, so everything was done virtually, as you can see, creating virtual Kanban boards and working through all the different scenarios. And what we wanted to know was, what are the key pain points in the industry? And apart from this group, we also took all of those results from the surveys that we took as well. So it was interesting because all of the pain points were very similar all around the world. They started really narrowing down to less than 10 different items that were coming up again and again. And we wanted the panel here to meet regularly to discuss how can we eliminate or alleviate those pain points. And so we went through a series of workshops to do exactly that. So it was a really a fantastic process of extracting some brilliant information from everybody that attended. So then on to the next slide, just talking about what is the vision that we created. It was a bold vision. We wanted to transform the construction industry by making it more efficient and sustainable. We wanted to partner with the world's leading construction experts, and we wanted to create a global industry forum, getting like-minded people together on a regular basis. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment as well. On to the next slide, please. So this is where we have landed. We have created what's called the Construction Professional in Built Environment Projects, or the CPBEP. It's 7 different courses where we run through as much, the 7 courses that we landed on by working with the expert panel. 3 of those courses have micro credentials, and then 1 of them has a capstone exam at the end. So you can see the first one is on Built Environment Project Communication Pro. So we kept seeing over and over again the importance of communication, the importance of not just speaking, but learning how to actively listen and to use that information to the best, to create the best outcomes for a project. That one comes with a micro credential as well. So it allows people to, once they've run through that content, to sit and take an exam, and you get some fantastic badges, as you can see on the right-hand side of your screen as well. The second one was on scope and change order management. So that came up, it's obviously very important to define scope. We know that there's always going to be significant changes on every single project, but it's about how we manage that change and making sure that everybody is aware. It links back into communication and ensuring that we are able to deliver on time and within budget. The next one was interface management in the built environment. Now, I worked on a project in Singapore that was called Marina Bay Sands, and that was a $4 billion development that had thousands and thousands of packages. So, all working together, significant interface issues potentially if you don't manage that properly, because as we know, there is a lot of gaps between contracts. So we wanted to make sure that we were talking about the importance of something that is often not talked about, and to make people aware that there is often this issue. We then had the Performance and Materials Management Pro, and that is also a micro credential. And again, as I was talking before about the importance of, what are the materials, where are you getting them from, what are the timelines to delivery, how does that fit into the critical path, looking at all of these key elements and a lot more. The 5th one was the Built Environment Technology and Innovation, which is also a micro credential. This was one of the ones that was very keenly spoken about. Everybody wanted to get involved in this particular topic. It's something that we know that technology has been having a huge impact on the world for many, many years. It's been changing our lives well before COVID. That was the big disruptor. And the fact is that organizations and individuals just cannot keep up with the pace of change in technology. There'll always be restrictions in either time or cost in being able to adopt and adapt the latest technology. And construction is by far the worst in this respect. It really does not adopt technology quickly. We know, I'm an engineer and a project manager. I know when you're delivering a project, the last thing you want to do is to try and bring in new technology to help you, because you just want to get things done. So a lot of the big players in the industry absolutely have research and development going on in parallel, and they can test these things out. But actually, the majority of companies can't do that. So they have to try and reinvent as they go along. So this, as I said, is a micro-credential. I think that'll be very keenly sought after. The next one is on contract and risk management in the built environment. That's a little bit more of the traditional things that have been discussed for a long time. At PMI, we have a very advanced risk management certification as well. This one is a little bit more high level on those two elements of contract and risk, but things that are just so crucial to the industry. And the last one that Stephen has talked about as well in terms of execution planning in the built environment, where CII and LCI have really taken the lead in that. And again, we think that this will create some wonderful content and some new thoughts as well in how to deliver projects better. So we're really excited about that. We'll just jump across to the second last slide, I think it is, that's talking about the Global Industry Forum. I did speak about this earlier. It was really important for us, apart from putting together that panel to help us create the course, it was important that we worked with the community to a much broader audience. We wanted to get together with the best minds in the construction industry. We wanted to have regular events, whether it's in virtual or hopefully face-to-face very soon as well. And we wanted to talk about the future of construction. What are the threats that we're seeing? And I think importantly, what are the opportunities? What are the things that companies are already doing that are leading the way? Best practices, releasing white papers, or again, teaming up with others in the industry and creating some really important content. So that's what we wanted to do here. We wanted to create that community and make sure that it's all inclusive, and we're getting some fantastic results out of that. So the next slide will show you the website that is now live at PMI. You can go to the pmi.org/certifications/construction. 6 of the 7 courses have been released and they're active online. And actually, we've had some wonderful uptake even throughout but prior to the official launch, we were running different versions on our website, and we've had nearly 1,000 people already that have taken these courses. So we're really encouraged by that. Jump on there and take a look through to see what would suit you. I think that's the last slide here. So I wanted to personally thank you very much. I hope that you are excited as we are about the initiative. I'm really confident that either as an individual or as an organization, there is some fantastic benefits in these courses. It's things that the courses themselves can be done as an individual course. If you just say, I need a little bit more information on execution planning, I'm going to jump on and do that one course. Or you can do all 7, and as I mentioned, at the end of the 7, you can then do the capstone exam. So as I said, very confident that will bring some great benefits. I believe now we have some time to do some Q&A as well, and hopefully there's some questions that have been put there. Sure, Steve. Yep.
Yeah, but before Maria jumps into the questions, I thought I might just say a couple quick things about the courses. First of all, I think that PMI really stepped up to the plate here and did an outstanding job of recognizing a need in the industry, and that this need for training of this caliber and quality has been around for 2-3 decades. I've been working in the industry since the mid 1990s, and I don't think that that's caliber and quality of training is out there. And if you were to take these courses, I think the thing that you would notice is a lot of effort went into these. These were very professionally designed. They have a significant e-learning component that, there were e-learning provided providers and people who really understood the pedagogy of online education, and just everything that the content that's in there is exactly the right content. One of the things that really stood out in the development of these courses for me as an educator was the idea that you could condense a lot of information because of the technology. And so it was something like 2 hours of content is the equivalent to 10 hours of classroom learning. So these courses are very efficient with people's time. I think the price point that they're at is kind of remarkable for the quality that's in these courses. So I just, you should take it and judge it for yourself, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at just how much information is in there and how well it's presented. So just wanted to add my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, I appreciate that. And likewise, you know, with CII and your team and the rest of the expert panel, you know, putting it together, I think really was brilliant to see that sort of collaborative effort. And you made a good point as well on the courses. They are all online, they're self-paced courses, and that was to recognize the fact that people are busy. You know, if you have a half an hour slot available, you can jump on and just do that 30 minutes and do the rest later on. Very, very flexible, which is what we thought we really needed at the moment. So thank you. Yes, I think we will hand over to Maria to see if there's any questions out there.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Stephen. Here's our first question. Can you say again, who would be a good candidate for this certification?
Sure, yeah, we didn't really cover that in detail, but it is anybody working in the construction industry, and it's across, so whether that's a developer, whether it's an architect, an engineer, a consultancy, a subcontractor, a contractor, it actually doesn't matter. This is anyone who has any touch points with those types of topics. We think that that's going to be very beneficial to them. And we started looking at this as well in terms of a level of experience. Where do we think it would be suitable? And we were targeting sort of a middle range of experience, but we found that in the early stages there was some relatively new engineers or construction related people who were working on this that gave some fantastic feedback. And at the same time, we had people at the other spectrum with 20 or 30 years of experience that were saying that there's some great information in there as well. So I think it's relatively broad. But Stephen, do you have some comments on that?
Yeah, I think the word, construction professionals in built environment projects, and the words built environment really address the fact that it's not just construction managers or architects. It's really anybody. You could have an insurance professional or a surety professional that's working in this industry, and these courses are very applicable to them. So that was intentional by design. But you do have to have a little bit of experience. So this isn't the construction projects or built environment projects 101. I think there was an understanding that this is for people who have been in and around these projects. I think the concept was 5 years or so on up, and sort of that 5 to 25 year range in somebody's career that they could take these courses and really get a lot of value. I think if somebody was at your company for 1 year or 2 years, certainly they could derive a lot of value, but the starting point, the terminology and the vocabulary might be a little bit challenging for them. But anyway, the survey and the research that PMI did really indicated that there was a need sort of in that, I'll say, early to mid-career professional to really upskill them.
Yeah, I think that's right. We had sort of addressed this as well. At PMI, we have for beginners almost in project management, we have a free 45-minute course called Kickoff that just provides introduction to project management. And then we have other things like the Certified Associate in Project Management, so called CAPM. So that's more of your sort of entry-level project management. And you're right, I think beyond that, then you're looking at this. And of course, this course is specifically in construction.
Perfect, understood. Next question is regarding one of the polls. So we said 127 million are allocated as waste for each 1 billion construction project. Can you guys elaborate on where this waste and efficiencies are mostly coming from?
Yeah, so I actually think that's a good number. I think it's a bit of a top-down number when you look overall. So we see losses in productivity. That's probably the area that people stress the most is, and when you think about rework and people standing around and not being able to be productive, it's not laziness. It's that the management doesn't have the practices and the technologies and the procedures in place to enable good work to keep happening. So that's a big one. But then you have a lot of, I'll call it transactional waste as well. You have money that doesn't actually go into the design or the construction or the materials of a project. You think about things like claims. Well, individual studies will say that claims on construction projects is about 7% of the total cost of the industry. Now, you don't have a claim on every single project, though, but overall, 7% is a really large number. You have counterfeiting, you have the counterfeit materials that occur. You have losses from foreign exchange, especially obviously on foreign projects. There's a whole number of issues related to these waste categories. But one of the things that we found at CII is that a whole host of these are really financial in nature. For example, if the owner requires everybody on the project to carry, certain types of insurance coverages and provide proof back to them, through certificates of insurance that they're covered. What actually we find out is that projects are about 300 to 400% overinsured, and you'll see this. Something will happen on a site, and it's been covered 3 or 4 times over, and a judge sometimes has to decide which insurance company is going to pay. So you take all of this, you roll it up collectively, and that's where I'm saying $127 million out of $1 billion is waste. Easily. It's easily that amount.
Yeah, I tend to think it's a bit conservative as well. And in some of our surveys, we looked at what is the waste in other industries, and it's about 114 billion. So it's quite a big difference. But obviously, if you're talking about, let's say, manufacturing, it's a much more controlled environment. So we've always got to expect that there is going to be a higher number. And whilst a lot of it is on things like material wastages, I think some of the things you touched on, there is a huge amount of rework. There is a huge amount of mismanagement in that rework, and communicating the changes and making sure that that's reflecting what those actual changes were. And there seems to be a cycle where you just go back and forth that contributes to that waste because it's taking a lot longer time. And that's the sort of things that we're really trying to address and make more efficient.
Perfect, thank you. Next question. What are some current or upcoming construction projects globally that you think could make a big impact?
Great.
Well,
yeah. Do you want to go first, Steve?
Yeah, in the United States, I mean, we've passed a major infrastructure funding package. I don't totally know the total cost, but it's in the trillions of dollars. I think 1.6 trillion was the initial wave of that. So the thing that I always think about something like that is, wow, wouldn't it be great if we had the people who are going to work on those and manage those projects, if they had the benefit of the wisdom that's in these courses. I think we as taxpayers, we would get a lot more for the money. I know several years ago in the prior administration, there was $1 trillion of infrastructure funding that was proposed, and they had identified 93 or 97 infrastructure projects around the United States. And I always remember thinking, wow, for $1 trillion, I mean, we should get 293 or 493 projects, right? That if we could really organize ourselves and execute them well, we should get a lot more for our money. So I think there's some big projects. You probably saw in the names of the companies that were on the expert panel. I think PMI did a good job of pulling that expert panel together from the standpoint that there were people who routinely executed $5 million jobs all the way up to $15 billion jobs. And so these courses are real sensitive to projects of all sizes. And so I think that's also a unique aspect. I don't know, Ben, if you had some ideas as well.
Yeah, certainly one. I mean, I've been working in Asia and the Middle East for quite some time. One of the projects definitely is the Dubai airport, or the Al Maktoum International Airport, and that's a total project value of about $82 billion. It's enormous. It has slowed down a bit, obviously, with the thoughts that nobody's been traveling in the last 2 years, but it's absolutely still going ahead. It's 21 miles of runways, and it's moving into a phase at the moment that phase alone is $32 billion. So that's a pretty remarkable project. I think it's going to be able to accommodate as many as 200 million passengers in a year. So that one's pretty exciting. But the other one I wanted to mention is a lot smaller, but I think some of these energy related projects are going to be absolutely critical. The Edwards and Sanborn solar facility and battery storage in the Mojave Desert, I think that's going to be really interesting. The idea is that it's expected to power more than 158,000 homes, and more importantly, it's about the displacement of carbon dioxide, which is about 300,000 tons as well. So I think those projects are important. There's other ones that are being done in the middle of the deserts in Australia as we speak, and I think they will have a really big impact on the world, actually.
Yeah, for CII being part of the University of Texas, being in Texas, we're always kind of really close to the energy sector. I think the carbon sequestration, the carbon capture type projects, the green hydrogen, there's going to be a volume of projects, and there's going to be a demand on the industry, and the supply just isn't there. And so we've got to do absolutely everything we can with the people and the resources we've got. And I think Ben pointed that out earlier, that the industry is really constrained from human capital and an overall financial capital. We've got to get ahead of that, because the demands on our industry are going to they're already high, but they're going to be even higher. That's where that $70 trillion infrastructure number comes from. And so we've got to come up with better ways to accomplish more with than we have in the past, right? And I think that really starts with the people, making sure we do everything we can to upskill and educate our people as best we can.
Yeah, I think, Stephen, that's the number one issue. Our customers are coming to us and saying they just can't get the right levels of talent, or they can't attract and retain that talent. So yeah, that element of upskilling is absolutely critical there. There was one other project that came to mind as well. You can't talk about projects without mentioning China. And this is a water-related project, and I think everyone knows that water is the new gold. The new oil. And they've got some projects underway that are running canals to run water to the north of China. That again, it's about an $80 billion project that will take nearly 50 years. So I think there's some pretty amazing projects out there at the moment. We just got to find all the right people to deliver them.
Amazing. Thank you for all those great examples. Next question here. You mentioned the industry has changed drastically since the pandemic began. What is one area or pain point you think still needs to be addressed by leaders?
Yeah, I would go back to that. One of the number one points that we found in our survey was really about communication. Now, I know it's an old thing in saying how important it is, but this is why this is the number one course we created here, is because of the fact is, if you are improving communication, and I talked about active listening before, if you're improving that level of communication, then your projects are going to be a lot more successful. And with the pandemic, obviously people are not in the same room together. We're relying on, things like this, where we're all meeting virtually. You've seen technology come in and improve the way that we can communicate with each other. But it's still about the individual's ability to get their message across, as well as have the empathy and the understanding of where other people are coming from. How can you accommodate what they're doing? At least consider their thoughts and comments, and then incorporate that into the best decision to move forward. So that would be still number one for me.
Yeah, and I think the communication has to occur at lots of levels. So on big projects, you'll look at supply chains that are that have 8 to 10 tiers to them, and the question is, how do you get that communication all the way down? Because a lot of times the problems are, they're with your supplier's supplier, and how is that company or individual going to ever raise an issue that ultimately is going to come and be, we talk about it as the black swan, but actually we should have known about it a lot sooner. And technology is there. I wonder, as a leader though, are we maximizing the communications and the technology to the maximum extent? The last thing I'll say is COVID did actually reveal some real beneficial things. So we've had some CII companies around factory acceptance testing of equipment. Instead of sending an engineer from Canada to Brazil on a business trip to accept some turbine equipment for a power plant that they were building, they actually sent a Microsoft HoloLens, and next thing you knew, they had 6 or 8 engineers in Canada looking and asking all kinds of different questions as they accepted this major piece of equipment. They said actually that was way better than just sending one engineer who might only have a certain set of things that he or she was interested in. That the technology and COVID taught us that there are some real benefits here. So I think as leaders, it's really to understand the pros and cons of all of that and try to incorporate that into our project execution plans.
Yeah, great example of how you can utilize technology and make it more efficient. And there's a lot of those sort of examples. And a lot of our surveys showed us that actually we're capturing a lot more data on our projects, but 95% of it, we're not doing anything with it. So it's one thing to recognize it and capture it. It's another thing to actually start using it for the benefit of our projects.
Great. Thank you. So we'll cover one more question. As the CPBEP has many different courses available, is there a particular course you would recommend someone to start with?
Well, I think the beauty of the course or the courses are that actually you can take any one, as I mentioned before. You can start anywhere. I would probably recommend to start with one that has a micro credential attached to it, because that's a little bit more substantial in the information, and then you're getting a badge at the end. But certainly the feedback that we've got is that there is a lot more benefits in linking all of these 7 together and then taking the capstone exam at the end. That's when you'll get the true value. You'll get a full certification at the end of it. But again, in terms of the order, you can take them in any order that you like.
I think one of the big things is that you have a lot of people that are on a project that have taken these courses. I think that's actually a major initiative over the course of a project or a program. One of the things that we've seen in CII, where you have a CII owner and a contractor, they understand the language, they understand the practices. They have about a 10% improvement in cost over people who don't understand the terminology. So this is actually an issue of, what do they say? Rising ocean lifts all boats or something. If you can get a lot of the people that are working on your project to have taken a number of these courses, I'm not really answering the question, because I think the question was which course to take. I think they're all valuable. But what you really want to try to do is get a lot of people to take a lot of these courses, and that's where a lot of value shows up. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and so just taking 1 or 2 courses is good, but if you get a lot of people taking the courses, the whole will be greater than the sum of the parts.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, is there one that you would recommend to start with?
I think risk is kind of a huge one, risk and materials management. I think also the one that on communications, and then the state of the art is the execution planning one, which is the one that's not released just yet, but that's going to be coming shortly.
Awesome, thank you. Well, that concludes our webinar for today. Thanks so much, Stephen and Ben, for your great presentation, and thank you attendees for joining us. We hope to see you all again for future webinars. Bye for now.
Thank you
you,
very
everyone.
much.